Hello everyone, welcome to From the Star Wars Library, where Star Wars is in print, the Force is with the readers, and we continue with the Thrawn Trilogy this time with Dark Force Rising. I'm your host, Nathan P. Butler. It's 1992, May of 1992. Been about a year since the release of Heir to the Empire, and Star Wars fans are chomping at the bit to get the next part of this official continuation of the Star Wars saga, the beginning of the official continuity. We finally get it in the form of Book 2 of the Thrawn cycle, or Thrawn Trilogy, Dark Force Rising. Says there, the #1 best-selling saga continues. Star Wars, Volume 2 of a 3-book cycle, Dark Force Rising, by the Hugo Award-winning author, Timothy Zahn. On the back of this, no opening crawl, just praise for Heir to the Empire. Interior, not going to read you the entire description this time around, but keeping in mind that this was written as the second book in the whole EU, the whole modern EU, this is a big deal sort of thing, starts out saying, the #1 New York Times best-selling Heir to the Empire was the publishing event of the year. The first novel to continue the adventures of Luke Skywalker, Princess Leia, and Han Solo beyond the events of the most popular trilogy in movie history. Now comes Dark Force Rising, the second volume of a 3-book cycle authorized by Lucasfilm Limited and written by Hugo Award-winning author Timothy Zahn. We're going to completely ignore the fact that we had some stuff taking place after Return of the Jedi there by Marvel Comics. That wasn't a novel, doesn't count. It's not part of the continuity, at least not yet. Now, this second book in the saga was preceded by about a month, actually, by another Star Wars book being published, but it's not one we're going to cover in depth, because we actually covered this before. In April of 1992, we saw the publication of this, Star Wars The Han Solo Adventures. It's the omnibus that includes Han Solo that stars in Han Solo's Revenge and Han Solo and the Lost Legacy by Brian Daley, which we've already covered much earlier in this video series. But bear in mind, there are some other things being published around the time that we're going to see some of the stuff we're looking at here being published. I'll make a note of those as they happen. Unlike Heir to the Empire, Dark Force Rising never got a 20th anniversary special edition. However, it did get a comic adaptation back in 1997. So let's take a look at those real quick. Again, it's Mike Barron doing the adapting, taking Zahn's novel and adapting it to comic form, this time with art by Terry Dodson. We start with issue #1. Issue 2, the more commonly seen image from this series. Issue 3. Issue 4. Issue 5. And then issue 6. Hard to tell, that's kind of a greenish, bluish background there. I kind of like the color scheme on this one. Now, this is the middle part of a trilogy. We left off in the end of Heir to the Empire with the notion that Akbar has been arrested for treason, and it's Borsk Fey'Lia's machinations that are leading to this happening, as Borsk Fey'Lia wants more influence within the New Republic. This one serves to push things along and wrap up most of that storyline, while at the same time bringing in some other new faces and other new situations. We find out a little bit more about the early split in the Rebel Alliance as we bring in Garm Bel Iblis from Peregrine's Nest, which is kind of a cool addition here to go alongside Maydeen and Mon Mothma and some of these other characters that we've seen. We also get to see Luke finally meet Joruus, the mad clone Joruus, with the 2 U's, Sabaoth, learn a little bit more about the background of the original Joruus Sabaoth, which gives us wrong dates for the Clone Wars in the novel, and see Luke actually train for a little while with Joruus before realizing he's batshit crazy, and then gets the heck on out of there thanks to Mara Jade. We also, at this point, find out more about the Nograi. While the hunt for the Katana fleet is going on, Leia has met some Nograi, and one of them has recognized her as the Malariush, the Lady Vader, the heir to Darth Vader, and we learn about the backstory of how the planet was poisoned. Darth Vader shows up to try to help them, etc., etc., which winds up again needing some tweaking later because it's set during the Clone Wars, and we know that those dates start getting screwed up when Lucas starts making the prequels and such. That's taken care of much later in the Republic comic series for the most part, and some of the essential guides and whatnot. But we get some background there. See the tide beginning to turn as the Nograi join with the New Republic against Thrawn. But we find this one ends with yet another cliffhanger which was something that this series did really, really well for the first couple of books here, which is why partly I read them over and over again originally. But this one ends with the realization that Thrawn has got some working Spartai cylinders because his ships are now manned by clones. Clones of who? We'll find out that later in the continuity. Once again, a great Star Wars book, middle part of a trilogy, so it does end on a less than spectacular note for our heroes. Does a good job of showing us the politics inside the New Republic, something that'll be very interesting in future books as well. The power plays with Borsk Falia and such I always found just about as interesting as the whole thing with Thrawn. And as this series goes on, we find more and more that Thrawn is this extreme tactical genius. In this book series, he's simply a genius who is able to play on things very, very well. But all the things he does, albeit genius, at least seem like they're in the realm of possibility. It'll be later books where it seems as though basically Zahn and others make Thrawn into this superhuman omniscient being who can control every aspect of a situation down to the point where they're basically a demigod type of character. But not yet. At this point, Thrawn is still believable, albeit devious, and really shows himself as a true threat to the New Republic. With only one book left in this trilogy, fans were left wondering, how's he going to be taken down? Surely he will be. But how is he going to be taken down? How will the Empire be defeated? And how will this, what a lot of folks thought of as a sequel trilogy, finally end in 1993 with The Last Command? So, we always ask the question, is this an essential read? Duh. Of course this book is an essential read. But again, is the comic series essential? Well, first off, let's take a look at a little bit of the artwork here. A little bit more realistic looking than what we saw with the art by the two-man team back in Heir to the Empire here. Still not terrific, but it's, decent enough at this point. You get to see, Luke looking more like Luke, Han looking more like Han than we saw in the other, though Han kind of looks like he's been punched a few times there, perhaps. Again, the book is an essential read. If you're not going to read the book, the comics are an essential read. Once you've read the book, the comics are not an essential read, but another oddity in Star Wars, in that we have a novel being turned into a comic adaptation, which is done extremely rarely within the Star Wars saga. With that, we'll wrap up this episode. Thank you for watching, and may the Force be with the readers.